Hi everybody, Steve Cady here with our Teaching Online Transition Learning Community or Discussion Group, and we are continuing our Tuesday, Thursday sessions, and we have a nice group here today. So what we're going to do today is check in. We're going to do 2 rounds of discussion with everybody that's here on the full session, the main room. We're going to start with asking Paul and Patrick to do any check-in with us on any updates, anything they'd like to share. Then we'll each go around and share, including Patrick and Paul, another round where everybody will share a tip, a trick, something you've learned that you think might be helpful to everybody. And then we'll do a final round of discussion where we will bring a question or a problem or something we'd like some help on, and we'll all work together to help you. So Paul, you want to jump in, and Patrick will give us any updates you'd like to share? Paul?
Sure, yes. Since the announcement came out that summer, much like the end of spring, was going to be essentially online only, obviously folks have had to make some adjustments to what they were planning on teaching and how they were going to deliver it. Now, we have had cases where a handful of classes have already been canceled because the faculty in question just thought they weren't conducive to being offered remotely or online. Some of these were field experience classes in biology and similar ones like that. And I get that. It would have been really challenging. So I'm sorry to see that this won't be offered, but under the circumstances, I trust the judgment of the faculty in question. So that being said, for all the courses that remain, we're still looking at a couple hundred that were face-to-face that will need to be done by way of remote teaching. I'm somewhat hesitant to call them online because, again, it'll likely be primarily synchronous video for a lot of them, but they won't be face-to-face in any capacity. So we've had to come up with a new process for vetting these courses. Now, typically when a course or when a department puts forward a course to change the delivery mode, there's a curriculum modification, and then they'll ask to have it get approved for distance delivery or hybrid delivery. In this case, the provost has still asked that we have a process for doing this, but there will be no curriculum modification. So that'll take away a lot of the most time-consuming hurdles toward that end. So they won't have to go through department or school review or college approval or anything like that. It's just anything that was face-to-face. If you want to teach it remotely, there's just going to be a straightforward step involving my office. So it's just the similar online and summer academic programs approval process. There's a quality matters-based check sheet. We've kind of stripped out a handful of the typical elements in it. And we'll send out the link to that campus-wide either later today or tomorrow. Might come directly from the provost, might come just to the chairs and directors email list with the expectation that the deans, ADeans, and chairs and directors would filter it down to everyone else. I'm not really sure in that aspect, but there's a form, you submit a syllabus, and my office will review it, and we hope to have a pretty reasonable turnaround time. Again, there will still be a couple hundred courses, so it won't be same day or anything like that. So we'll get that done, and we look forward to working with everyone.
Cool, very cool.
I would really echo a lot of what Paul had to say. My only other thing would say is that our current focus in IT is to reach out to departments and faculty directly and make sure that they have support for what they need. We're creating a decent number of online strategies. I continue with my team to update those daily. Our goal here is to transition now from content creation into moving towards assessment, in particular towards final assessment. So as we hear more and more from different faculty constituent groups and some working groups that I and my team are part of, we're creating the documentation necessary to support those going forward.
Cool, thanks, Patrick. So let's go ahead and just check in. I'll start off with a tip that I'm going to do, which is I'm going to teach for the upcoming residency with my master's class. We get this, we're going to be in class from 6 to 10 on Friday, 8 to 5 on Saturday, and 8 to 3 on Sunday in video sessions. And the students were planning in our original design when we were going to be meeting in person they were using a variety of collaborative techniques to facilitate, and they were going to be facilitating using these techniques. One is called World Cafe, where people sit at tables and have conversations, and then they get up and rotate to new tables and have conversation and rotate. Another one is Open Space, where people pick a topic and they choose to work on topics in groups. And another one is Appreciative Inquiry. We're going to have a client, a secret client. I call it the Iron Chef event design experience, where the students work for 6 hours with a client live, service learning, and designing a process for collaboratively solving a problem or planning a future. In this case, it's going to be a strategic planning process that they'll be designing for a particular nonprofit organization that they don't know yet. And the secret ingredient shows up that day. And that'll be on Saturday. And then we have Collaborative Arts, a group that's going to use artistic approaches to engage the students. This was all going to be done in person, a variety of different ways. And so they are all now redesigning their experiences to use online tools to have all of that happen. So for example, the World Cafe group creates a cafe experience. And they've designed an experience for everybody to come. But what's kind of cool is they have got this great experience. They're going to use the breakout rooms, they're going to use tables, and they're going to do different stuff, and people are going to rotate and have discussion. They mailed everybody a World Cafe packet so they could create their own ambient setting at home with some nice little stuff, to have for the experience from home. So they mailed a little welcome kit to prepare for their online experience they're going to have together. Another group is going to be doing a variety of things. One is they're going to be using this thing called Visual Explorer. That's where it's a technique, you can look it up. It's a really nice tool to use, where you give students and they find an image that represents the answer to a question that's relevant to the moment. And the Visual Explorer technique provides, when you buy the kit, a stack of all these images. And you can make, a question in any image. They just go through images and find an image that helps them to think about the answer to that question, which is kind of cool. What they're going to do is they're going to have the students go and pick from some images or find an image, save it to their desktop, then use it as their virtual background and bring it into the discussion, kind of like, this is how I'm feeling today, And so all the students will bring in and have their background be that image, and then they'll use that to generate discussion. They're going to do that for one of the activities. And it's really, the question is going to be, they've been working on their preferred future self as a part of their bio. They create a preferred future bio in the class. So they create this bio 5-10 years out, and they write it as if it happened, if it's there, and it's this amazing bio that they imagine having 5 to 10 years. They're going to create an image that kind of captures the essence of their preferred future self, pick an image, make it their background, and then the students are going to create an activity amongst the students where they share and tell the story of how that background image connects to their preferred future self, for example. So what I'm going to be very interested in is how we're going to do with being in front and in a camera, engaged, because they're going to go from one group activity to the next group's doing an activity, to the next group, to a client, bringing the top CEOs in this nonprofit on the board in on Saturday, like 6 people, to work with them to present a solution to help them plan their future as a nonprofit organization. Onward to some stuff on Sunday. I'm just going to be curious what it's going to be like for them at the end of it. And we had choices of like shortening it up or figuring it out, and they want to do it. So it'll be very interesting to see how we do being like this for an entire weekend. It's kind of crazy thinking about it, almost. But we're trying new stuff out, which is kind of cool. So that's my tip, trick, and thing that I'm working on. I'm going to pick someone to go next, and whoever goes next, if you want to pick someone to go next. So Christina, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to go next and share with us a tip that you might have, a suggestion you might want to share.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm on, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, you are.
Yeah, nothing glamorous. Steve, nothing at all compared to what you are designing there. I've just been really delighted to be able to use the discussion board so in such a good way. I'm still struggling about how to assess the discussion board postings. I've been using Zoom, and I have used the polling, which is a nice way of having some interaction, and the students seem to like that as well. I use the chats in my German class because I can't always, they can't always hear or understand what I'm saying, and then I can quickly do a correction in written form, so it's almost like a blackboard. So those things are working well for me. I'm going to add my question, because I think, you know, this is my use of this technology is so basic. I'm just very proud that in 3 weeks, I've never heard of any of this stuff before.
Isn't that awesome?
It all.
And you're still smiling.
Yeah.
For now.
Last week I was not, but I find that Zoom can easily become a kind of a talking head experience for, you know, I've got a group of 25 students, 30 students in my international studies class. And even though I use polling, it, you know, the affect is not there. There's no connection. And I'm wondering whether anybody has ideas about that. That's my only concern right now. I'm trying to figure out the pedagogically most useful ways of using all this stuff, you know, without getting sidetracked by the bells and whistles.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Christina. And we'll come back when we go back around and do some problem solving. We'll jump into that and also talk a little bit about there's also another question around how you might assess the discussion boards, and I think help you with that as well. So when we come back around. So who would you like to go next? And Theo would like to say hi to you in his best East German accent.
East German. Also mein Vater ist aus Dresden gewesen, aber wir haben keinen sächsischen Akzent gehabt.
Are you kidding? Hat er richtig dann geredet wie die Dresden?
Absolut. Er hat versucht.
Ach du meine Güte, also mein Vater ist aus Limbach-Oberfrohna, gleich neben Karl-Marx-Stadt. And the rest of the people on the Zoom are right now, what the heck are they doing? This is the southern East German accent where there is no hard consonants whatsoever, so every T sound turns into a D sound.
When we learn grammar, mein Vater hat immer gesagt, ja, das ist ein Adjektiv-Attribut, und deshalb haben wir dann auch fleißig geschrieben, bis ich dann an der Schule gehört habe, dass es eigentlich ein weiches B ist und nicht ein hartes B. Aber das
also Christina, wir müssen mal irgendwie für uns beide eine Zoom-Session und ein bisschen sechseln und so, ja?
Ja, also
we'll have to just speak Saxonian to one another to
alles
be
klar.
connected.
Alles klar. Ja, alles klar. Tschüss.
Buen trabajo. So, all right, Christina, who would like to go next?
Christina?
I think Theo should go next.
I should go next.
Okay.
Well, so I'll share with you this this ties into my sort of learning, I guess. It is so important for us to use what we know about good mental health practice and good meeting practice, to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt that amygdala part of our brain, that old brain that does the whole fight, flight, and free stuff, that is in play in this day and time, and that there are ways for us to manage it to some extent. So whether it's for you prayer or meditation or mindfulness or whatever label you have or are comfortable with, I did a session last week that I'll share in the chat on how you can use music and mindfulness in virtual sessions to sort of get alignment and take a breath and take a pause and get that pattern interrupt that allows people to engage with a new context, a new situation, helps us concentrate and so forth. That's really been meaningful to me. And one of the ways that you can leverage that, I'm actually going to have to go back to the blog post that I shared with you guys and add this, is a good joke that sort of can engage people can really do one of those pattern resets really well. My father is a Baptist minister, and we had an elder in the church who was originally from Leipzig, which is another town in that Christina mentioned Dresden, where her dad's from. My dad's from outside Karl-Marx-Stadt. Leipzig is like those three cities are close to one another, and they all have this East German Southern accent that doesn't have hard consonants. But he was a literature professor, this elder in my dad's church. who taught in northern Germany, and actually Europe's oldest university in Greifswald. And so he had a very, very, you know, kind of like we maybe think, we might think of like the Queen's English and what they might at Queen's College in London. That's how that's what his German was. However, when he started speaking English, his Saxonian accent was in his English. So his English sounded something like this, where all the consonants were very soft, and he would talk to people like this. And for a normal German, he would immediately be able to recognize that this is clearly his Southern East German accent in his English language. So when he would go and he would greet people from Sweden, for example, he'd say, "My dear brothers and sisters, I am so happy that we're here today this morning, that we can share this time together." And everybody else is just dying and cracking up, and he didn't realize that his accent had crept into his English. So I appreciate your smiles. That's what I wanted to share. I'm complete.
Awesome.
Laura, will you go next?
And Teo, if you could you in the chat give a little explanation to that link? Because when I put it into the chat notes, people, so they can know what that link is about.
Sure.
I don't know that I have any tips that anybody hasn't already used, but I'm very happy to say that I actually was able to screen share during a Zoom meeting last Friday, and I was very excited that it worked well and my students could see what I was trying to show them, and it was just a beautiful thing. So I'm happy that worked, but I'm sure you've already all done that. So I don't really have any tips. I'm kind of behind the times. I'm just trying to learn as much as I can from all of you. I also started working with my graduate clinicians with simulated patients this week, and that has gone fairly well, I'm happy to say. So it's just all new, and I'm hoping that each time I use this technology, it gets easier and easier for me and better for the students. I hope it's a better learning experience. But so far, so good. So thank you all for all your support. But I don't think I have any hot tips for anybody. I'm sorry about that.
Well, I think you don't have to be, think of where you are and what's the tip for where you are that worked well when you did the screen sharing. What's one key thing you learned about doing screen sharing you thought was important to making it work well?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised that it was so easy. I didn't know whether I should expect some technical glitches along the way, but it was very smooth. So I don't know that I have any tips there. It worked beautifully.
So do it using it works. That's your tip. Do screen sharing. Do screen sharing.
Life is good.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Laura. Who would you like to go next?
How about Steve?
You're on mute, Steve.
I was trying to figure that out. Yeah, I knew yeah, I'm just holding the space bar. That's all I can figure out. Before I get started, I did want to say that mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut, aber mein Vater kommt aus Wien. So, but so I don't have a hot tip, but today I did a Zoom class. I don't know what I missed. I don't know if we've discussed the fact that now the university is recommending not Zoom, but so I did 2 parts of a Zoom meeting because I was meeting for an hour and have that 40-minute time limit. And what I did is I created an announcement for the students. And for the second half, I clicked on the link in the announcement and it didn't record the session for me. So I don't know if that's because I clicked on a link or what exactly happened, but it didn't record it for me. So I don't know if that's if I actually have to go into Zoom to start the meeting officially that way, if that's how it records or what the issue was. But I don't know. That's what I did, and it messed up, and I'm not sure exactly what the problem was. But so my tip might just be make sure if you're going to record your sessions to always start the meeting, maybe. I don't know. And then I have the same problem that Christina has. I've got just engagement is minimal for my class. I'm talking for an hour with 2 students, maybe talking once each during the whole hour, and it's it's terrible. I try and a couple people will type in a message, but it's not working. And then I post the recordings online and no one even watches those. So I don't know what's going on. So any tips for that would be helpful.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Who would you like to go next, Steve?
Much pressure here. I don't know. I gotta hold on a second. I can't figure out. I can't even see who. Okay, let's have Carol since she nicely helped me with my mic.
So I'm in awe of how quickly the uptake has been, and how people who have been doing this for a while have jumped in, and you could be on Zoom advice calls for how to engage and how to do some of these collaborative processes that Steve talked about 24/7. And I guess the tip I would give you is watch or pay attention to how Steve engages us. And one of the things is not to give the students an option. Start with the check-in and have each one call on the other one. So their voices come into the room and they feel like they're there. And I'm very curious, and this is a common issue, Steve, this isn't yours. When you're in a face-to-face, do you lecture for an hour and a half or whatever time it is? So what tools, what methods do you use face-to-face, and how can you adapt them? The creativity that seems to be coming, like what Teo said, he's leading people to think about how you can teach music and art. If you can do things like that online, you have to be able to do what you did in a class. So I don't know what your tricks are, and clearly you have to do your own style. But my overarching learning for myself and watching people is try. And if you tell the students you're trying, they'll be with you as opposed to seeing you as the expert.
Well, thanks, Carol. Yeah, who would you like to go next, Carol?
I think everybody has gone.
Well, Paul and Patrick have probably a good tip. They gave us an update.
Sorry. I heard Paul and Patrick's voices, but not their experience. Oh, Paul.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I certainly feel your pain regarding student engagement with online classes. I think it really depends on what type of classroom experience you're hoping to provide the students. If the goal is to only teach the course by way of Zoom or WebEx, and that's it, then there could well be cases where you just feel like you're doing nothing but talking the entire time, and you're only really having any sort of back and forth exchange with just a few students, and everyone else are just kind of sitting there passively. I think that would be a good opportunity, though, to look at other options for your class where the synchronous video part is one of several tools you use to better engage your students. For me, if I'm teaching any class, hybrid, face-to-face, I don't really teach any solely face-to-face classes anymore. They're either hybrid or online. Or a fully online class, I always do graded group discussion forums. So I always take a class that might be large. I might have 80 to 120 students, or might just be 35 students, and I will split them up into groups of 8 to 12 in Canvas, sometimes even smaller. And I'll have weekly or sometimes twice weekly graded group discussion forums with a very specific rubric on how I'm assigning a point value at the end of each discussion forum. So there's no real guesswork involved in that. It's always quantity, quality, and timeliness, and there's more detail for each one there. So I do that, but then for sessions that would have been just face-to-face only, say if this was a hybrid large lecture hall class or something, I would not just lecture the entire time. I try and flip my classrooms if it's not already an online class. So if I have any things like PowerPoint presentations or anything like that, those are typically in my Canvas course shell with some sort of narration, and they're usually in very small snippets, nothing really long that would have been, an hour-long session or anything like that. But I'll try and devote anything that would have been face-to-face class time for more group work if possible. So I might show a brief video clip, and then in my face-to-face class, I'll divide them all up in that class right there. It'll typically coincide with the groups that I've got in Canvas, but I'll usually have groups or teams or something like that to really compartmentalize everything. And I'll say, okay, so you 7 here, turn your seats around as best as you can, face each other. Here's our assignment for the day, and I'll have a slide that might have instructions on what we're going to do, and then what deliverable each group is expected to have at the end when we kind of report back at the end. And then I'll have something like a countdown timer flash on the screen with a Google timer or something to let them know how we're doing on time. So it's those types of things. So I try not to do that. Now, I don't want to sound snooty or arrogant or anything by saying I don't lecture. I mean, let's face it, to an extent we all lecture, but I try and minimize that. And then if I was doing any sort of synchronous video thing, I'd also try to minimize that. And one last thing, I don't want to take up all the time here, but I think it's very important for an online or hybrid class to have perhaps different types of assignments, different types of deliverables. So, I mean, yes, you can do quizzes and exams in Canvas, but I mean, there are ways to structure those where it's not just a Scantron style multiple choice. You could have students work on curating their own online magazine using a tool like Flipboard. You can have them work in teams to create their own dynamic interactive timelines using a tool like Tiki-Taki. Those are all free, or we could have class accounts for those that are institutionally paid for. So there are great deliverables for these, and you could just create equally great rubrics to assign a point value to them for your class. And it's something that's just slightly different than a typical quiz or a test or a research paper or something like that. Like instead of an annotated bibliography, maybe they do an interactive timeline, something like that. So for me, that helps keep them engaged, but that's just for me. I'm not saying it would work for everyone.
Cool. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because I feel like a lot of that was based on my comment. So here's my question. So in person, I do a lot of what Paul was saying. I mean, I do exactly. I mean, I have online lectures, so I don't have to. So I can minimize what I do in class.
Great.
I have them 10 to 20 minutes long, and I expect them to watch them before class. I have a quiz to kind of make sure that they've done it. I know they all don't, but then in class, I kind of go over the topics with activities and open up the discussion. And in class, I'm able to get, just by opening it up and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And I don't like cold calling in class, and I might need to do that online because that might be the only way I can get it to happen. But in class, I still end up getting a good, healthy discussion going just because eventually everyone's talking. But here, when I say, what are your thoughts about this? And I wait for 30 seconds or not 30 seconds, but wait for a chunk of time, I get the same 2 people that are willing to do a quick answer. I don't know if it's because they're nervous that they're being recorded or they're just not paying attention. And so for me, I mean, I only have the free version of Zoom. It's like the group work. I don't know. I mean, that's not a feature that's in the small groups, I believe. So I guess I could pay for the deluxe version or whatever it's called. But then I also have a problem. I mean, a lot of what Paul was saying to me sounds like stuff that I would need to set up for a new class. Like I have no problem. Like I agree with all the discussion boards and things like that, but I already had a syllabus and I already had a grading scheme. And I kind of, me personally, I don't feel like I should change how the students are evaluated now 2/3 of the semester. And
Sure.
so that's why, so I feel like I'm locked into what I said at the beginning of the semester. And I don't feel it'd be fair to say, now you've got to do discussion board as part of your grade when I didn't require that beforehand. So I don't know if that make sense. But that's my fear. So I don't know how to. That's
Yeah,
my
so
fear right now.
So I think that's a good. So what we'll do. So Patrick, I'm going to have you share your thoughts on your best practice. But let's just stay with this topic and address this particular issue, and then we'll go, Patrick, check in with you, and then we'll go to another challenges people have. So the question, I think, is how to make the synchronous video sessions more engaging and liven them
Interactive
up
too. Yeah.
and interactive and so forth. I think that's the question. So
I'm going to just chime in here. When we get to mine, I'm going to probably go against this mold. But one of the things I immediately thought of when you were talking, Steve, is check in with your students. I have talked to more students that don't have working microphones on their devices than you would suspect there being. Potentially, some of the issue might not be that they're unwilling to chime in or talk. It may be that they are unable to chime in and talk. And if you run into a student like that, maybe suggest that they use a mobile device as opposed to their computer, so that they do have, other options for microphones. I've got at least 5 open tickets right now where we're considering shipping laptops to students because they don't have a working microphone on their current laptop.
One thing that I want to offer that I don't know if I always do it for all Zoom sessions, but when I have slides, I always have a slide at the top that includes the offer that you can call in. So even if you can see the screen share, whatever, but your audio is not working, if you click on that little up arrow next to the microphone button, even if you don't have one that's working, that's connected, it gives you options to call into the session. So that might be an easy workaround for somebody who doesn't have a working microphone. You could be, logged in as one account with your laptop and looking at Professor so-and-so screen share and using the phone on the side on the desk as your audio connection, if you will, and that can work quite effectively.
It's a great idea.
One other thing is, I think there's a design principle. So if we step back and look at what is the principle you want to bring forth. One is you want to create conditions where each individual has to contribute something. So you got to, so that the individual contributes, and sometimes using breakout rooms, because you can with the free version do breakout rooms. And also, whenever you start a session, just make sure you you have to click intentionally record. So on the bottom right, you click record to the cloud or record to your computer. You'll see that when you start as the host, when you open it up, and so if you came in as a guest, you created a session and then you came in as a guest to that by accident by clicking on the link, that's different. But if you are the host and open it up, you can click on record and then record to the cloud or record to your desktop, and then you can go from there. But I think what the design principle is: can you do anything to cause individual, group, whole interaction, where each individual has to speak in a small group, and then that group has to make sense of the conversation they had in their group, and then that gets shared to the whole. So if you create that condition, I think that is a first start, with an expectation that you put them in the groups and that each group has to have a representative willing to report out. So you're moving them in the direction of each speaking, but you're slowly moving them in that direction by speaking in a small group, and then a representative speaking when you come back to the whole, and each person reports out. Now, what do they talk about in the small group? It might be that it's a problem they have to solve, or it's something they have to create, or it's a thing they have to do. But make sure it's done in a way that each person has to bring their version, their response, their action to that. So if you give them a task when they go to the small group, one person can answer it all, do it all, and nobody else has to talk in the small group. That can't be it. So you got to do something. So what you do is, in order to create that, you give them the question and you have them all answer it. Like right now, all of us, here's a question, get your answer. Everybody right now, 90 seconds, what's your answer? What are your initial thoughts? Or 30 seconds. Write it down on a piece of paper. Now what I want you to do is go and share that with your small group and come up with one answer as a whole. And I'm going to give extra credit to the one that gets it, to all the ones that get it right. Not and so you don't have to hurt your points, but you add some, put some, you know, something into it. So that individual group whole technique is one way to get the engagement going. I'll stop there. There's others, but what any other thoughts on engagement?
Steve, just a quick FYI, you said that you had trouble with the breakout rooms in the free version. You do have to turn it on. It's not on by default. So you have to go into your settings in Zoom in your account. I think it's under settings, meetings, scroll down quite a ways, and then it's something like enable breakout rooms or allow hosts to create breakout rooms or something like that. And you have to turn that feature on. It's not on by default. So that
All right, thank you. I'll take a look for that. Thank you.
But it is definitely available in the free account.
Other thoughts on creating more engaging sessions? Yeah, Christina?
I've been working with PowerPoints as well, but I find that PowerPoints don't allow me to see everybody in the larger class. And I think, so I'm going to experiment with something this week, and that is, I actually did it on Friday in one class. I send the different things that I want to cover in class in advance, and with a hope that and with a few questions that they should mull over. And then I ask them to have that ready for us when we get together, and then using so that I can see them, and then we do our little breakout rooms, and they have the questions that they need to deal with and they've thought about. And I'm hoping that that will be smoother for me, especially since I'm also dealing with polling. And I have to say that after a while I get confused about what am I doing now with polling, you know, because you have to press on different buttons. So I'm thinking I'm going to give that a try.
Are you currently working on 2 monitors, Christina, or are you just looking at your laptop screen when you do these sessions?
I only have one monitor.
I would encourage you so much to try to do Zoom sessions with a second monitor. And a simple way to test it and trial it is to see if you have a flat screen TV somewhere that you can set up in front of for a test session. Find a long enough HDMI cable, connect your laptop to that TV and use it as a second screen. That way you can have the PowerPoint, for example, on your laptop screen, maybe the polling to the right of that, and then have the whole class, as many as you can see at one time, on the other screen to have that ongoing engagement and so much more real estate on your screens to manage the session. I think that's a challenge for me anyways. If I do anything with more than 5 or 6 people on Zoom, I want that second screen to help me manage the session rather than do it all on a small laptop screen.
Okay.
To echo that,
Thank you.
I actually have 2 screens in my setup right now, and I find myself when I'm doing webinars, when I'm training or having people where I want to see their video, I find myself going into a room where I have a larger television, because I find that I can see the students so much better if I move the video cluster of my students to the bigger TV and then use my screen, my laptop screen or my desktop screen to share. So even though I have a second regular monitor, the TV is a really effective way to get more detail on each student, just because you have a bigger screen.
And when you go to share your screen, you pick which monitor or TV you want to share. So you can be looking at one and showing just the other. I think the other thing, and Paul would probably could speak to this, and that is, I'm a real believer when you're synchronous, only do things together synchronously that you couldn't otherwise do. So whenever possible, try to remove lectures, you know, and record them and make them available. But what I do sometimes is I'll just take the opportunity with a live audience to do a lecture, save the recording, and then the next time I'm teaching it, give that recording out with an assignment, and then we come together. So what you want to do is give them a really challenging problem so that they have to come to class, come to the session with you to get the help they need to get it done. And if they don't come, what happens? Or if they don't watch the video because they couldn't make it for a reason, they actually don't perform well. So you should make the live session such that they've got to watch it or attend it in order to actually complete the assignment. And you tell them, here's your assignment, here's your task, get working on it. And the session, we're going to cover some key questions and some things in order to complete the assignment. It's due 2 days after our online session, which I'll have the recording up and you'll be able to watch that, blah, blah, blah. And then you bring them in and then do an activity to cause them to bring their questions, coalesce them, co-teach each other, share their learning, you know, that individual group whole kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Steve. I mean, if you're going to use synchronous video, make it for a specific purpose that you couldn't already duplicate using Canvas or any of the tools that you have at your disposal already. So it's a good idea. Make it a must-have experience, for lack of a better way of putting it.
And then you always know the pair and share. You can share some information with them, put them into quick breakout groups, and say, okay, talk about, and the best 3 questions when you do pair and share is, what'd you hear? What are your reactions? What questions do you have? You know, those are 3 really good ones. What'd you hear? What are your reactions? And what questions do you have? And just say, go discuss that for 3 minutes. I'll bring you back. And then they'll come back more primed to talk with you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? So I found that I can do the breakout rooms. I found that on there. Thank you for that. When you do breakout rooms and you're recording the session, does it record all the breakout rooms? What do you get?
Only where you are.
There are specific options you can enable, but that's, yeah, it's somewhat cumbersome to set up. You can, but it takes some doing.
What you can do is hit pause.
Yeah.
Pause recording. When everybody comes back, start recording. And say, okay, we just took a break and we are, we just took a break. We're now back. Let's go ahead and keep going. So with it, where it shows the recording, while you're recording, you'll see a pause button there. Like I'm right now looking at mine, I can pause.
I've seen that, but you can't record the actual, easily record all the
How you
separate
can
rooms.
do that is you can personally go and jump into some breakout rooms and just kind of go from one to the next. And it'll be kind of like you're a fly kind of dropping in and getting some of the conversation with the groups, and it's recording that as you go. That's kind of interesting, right? Because it's live, moving around and flying from one group to the next with you and kind of seeing some cool stuff.
I think there's a way, Steve, to just get their voices, but this whole thing about not having a microphone is a real detriment. One of the things that I'm hearing you say is they're comfortable in class and they're not comfortable with this technology, and they didn't grow up learning that way. They're used to the expert and a little bit of conversation. So if you start and take, depending on how many students, have them do a 30-second check-in, at least the first time you're trying something new, they might realize it's not as difficult. And a check-in that's relevant to them, Steve always says, your name, where are your feet touching the ground? And that might be interesting to see where they're set up to do Zoom since they're not in the classroom. I've heard students are living in their cars. That's really scary. So you might generate some sense of community, which would make them respond.
That's an excellent point, Carol. I agree.
What I would also offer, here's another thing I forgot to say. We've talked about this before. Encourage them to use the chat to talk to each other, and that it's not rude to be having a side conversation while you're having that. And even to ask them to answer a question in the chat first, or to pose what's going on for them. If they can't say it publicly, go ahead and share it, and then to read their voice, even for those that are still nervous and you're moving them in the direction. But you sometimes have to grade them on their participation. You sometimes have to just say, we're gonna, have to, and maybe you start with, if you don't want to, like Steve, you're not wanting to change your grading scheme, you might have to change it and say, look, because things have changed, I'm gonna start evaluating participation during and evaluating, that everybody's contributing in some fashion. Or you just give extra credit for those that keep doing it, but make it such good extra credit that they just do it, right? You know, don't worry about grade inflation. Just get people's behaviors moving in that direction with some significant points, you know?
So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to step in here. I have a story that I think will help change a little bit of the conversation and prepare some people for things that was going to be what I shared. I have a student that I don't want to give his name out specifically, but he contacted IT to talk about some things, and we ended up just having a session with him. And one of the struggles he had is that he moved home with his parents when the whole remote session started. His mother is deemed a non-essential employee, and their daycare closed. So his mother is staying home now to care for his younger siblings. So he has picked up 2 separate jobs at different grocery stores around him, and is now twice as busy as he was when he was here at ETSU. And he was complaining to us that there were so many synchronous events happening in his classes that he just did not have time to attend. And he felt like he was going to fail this semester because so many of his instructors were grading on participation in live WebEx or Zoom sessions, and he just can't attend them because his family needs him now to be a bread earner. And he was considering dropping out of the semester rather than continuing. And I know that this is likely a worst case story, one of the worst stories out there, but I really want to start helping people understand that, like, some of your students have credible reasons that synchronous learning is not going to work for them. So when you're planning, in particular, if you're going to be planning over the summer, you know, start thinking of ways, like people talk to you about, creating your lectures online, moving as much content as you can asynchronous. And if you do want to have these touch-ins where people are communicating back and forth, consider something like discussion boards where they aren't synchronous, but they are student interaction with each other where they can learn from each other. We've been doing what we can to try to build some tools out on our strategies page. We've put together a whole new set of Camtasia videos that we hope make Camtasia just a little bit easier to use. And with the CFE now offering that as an online course, we've been trying to, in-person course through WebEx, we've been trying to move that to just online videos. We also have a new strategy up in there, how to do one-on-one sessions for your office hours if you want to just have one person at a time and prevent other people from joining, so you can have those more private conversations. We published a strategy on how to do that on our website. I just want to make sure that people are starting to think about ways that you can do some of this student-to-student learning in an asynchronous manner as well, because not every student out there is going to be able to attend your synchronous session.
Yeah, Patrick, that's really good. And one of the things that prompted me, that I thought about was listening is key. It's letting the students know, hey, share with me what's going on. I'm noticing that the same 2 people are talking, or I'm noticing that one person, or I'm noticing that a certain group is and others aren't. Help me understand what's going on, and I'm curious why. What why aren't you contributing more, and what can we do? What is happening with you? And really see if you can get them to share with you, even in the chat room or offline, and say, I want to know, so that we can make sure you're successful, and our goal is to help you finish. If they get a sense of that, I think you might get some good diagnostic information that might help you make the adjustments you need to make. The other thing is, I try to make it so that the sessions are recorded. And I always tell the students, look, if you can't be there, at least watch the recording, and so that, and you can watch it on your own time. And if some students are just too busy to take the classes, that gets to be a challenge, right? So let's say that they are just too busy because they got 3 jobs. What do you do? Do we compromise the integrity of the class? So maybe what we with that student, you say, look, what if you get a C and you get a pass, you get a satisfactory? The grading system has changed. Let them know about that, so they know they have an option there to at least help them get the learning, knowing that it's not going to be ideal, but at least get them through. And if they know that you're there to help them get through, I think they might. Those would be some of my quick reactions. Anybody want to add anything that you might do to help hear more from the students, or that kind of thing?
Well, I always create in every one of my classes an open discussion forum as well that runs the entire length of the semester, regardless whether or not it's a 6-week summer session or a 15-week class. And that is intentionally an ungraded forum. That's where students can just go and discuss anything with any other student in class, or me, or if the topic in a session in a regular graded discussion forum gets kind of off on a tangent, I'll just sort of move it over there. And I think that helps a lot too. It kind of turns into almost a mini FAQ for the class. So I think that might be another option to do. One other thing I wanted to bring up on a related subject, doesn't necessarily have to do with synchronous video, but I would kind of echo what Patrick was saying about we need to be mindful of our students' situations now that their work-life balance has been upended just like ours have. So whatever tools we are using to get the job done for our classes, we really need to take that into account. An example I could think of is we've been having a pretty big debate on proctoring tools like Respondus lockdown browser. Patrick and I and several other people have been discussing this because on one hand, faculty want to use a proctoring tool when they have an exam or a quiz in their class now that they're, you know, unfortunately being forced to teach it by way of remote teaching tools. And that makes sense, particularly if they were going to have a similar testing environment in a face-to-face class. Yet on the other hand, even though Respondus is pretty deeply integrated into Canvas, it's not supported on every platform. So if you have, for example, a Chromebook, it's not going to work in a web-based browser tab format, and they have no plans of making that work. Chromebooks are terrific. I'm using a Chromebook. I have one right now, actually. But in that case, it won't work. Or there might be other students, and my own nephew in Michigan, I just ran into this with him. He has a desktop gaming computer that he built himself, and he uses a headset with that, with a boom mic, so he can play online with his friends. He does not have a camera associated with that. He just has his headset with his boom mic, and he has the computer he built, and then he has his iPhone, and that's it. So if he's being put in a situation where he has to use Respondus to take an exam with the lockdown browser, he cannot do that. So he asked me if I could dig through my various boxes of technology crap that I've accumulated over the past 51 years now, I guess, in my basement to see if I could find anything. And I did. I found one of those old eyeball cameras with a built-in microphone from 2011. And I said, all right, I looked it up. I think there's a Windows 10 driver. I'm going to send it to you. So we got it last night. He connected it and right away it recognized it. So he's fine now. But how many other students are in that same boat where we might be asking them to do something that they have no technical means of doing right now, and simply hopping in the car and going to Walmart to getting a camera or getting it from Amazon for the time being are no longer viable options. So just something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just posted in chat about that. If you go and look on Amazon right now and just try to buy a webcam, the first 4 pages of results, everything's either $500+ or not in stock.
Or if it is, it'll take 6 weeks to arrive. So
Yeah, so we got to just make adjustments, and I think helping people get there and figuring out, really listening is the key. I think really listening, and I always, you know, the idea of do no harm to the whole, do no harm to the individual, and if you do harm to one, go back to the drawing board, you know, and as long, you know, if you have a little bit of grade inflation because you're making accommodations for students and you're making sure that the learning's happening, and you're making some accommodations, and it's hard to differentiate those students that are gaming, because I have had a few students that seem to be gaming the system a little bit to try to take advantage of it, as opposed to, you know, really having issues. And it's just, I'm just going to err a little bit on the side of the students and let that happen. And with using some of my, you know, techniques or whatever to try to really suss out the legitimacy of things. I think that's what we have to do. Like we've always done that, right? You know, we have all our techniques for kind of trying to suss those things out. One last thing that, and we're going to check out, was, Christina, we'll talk about this on Thursday, is we'll focus on, and maybe we can all bring back, those that can come back on Thursday, discussion board. Let's talk about discussion boards and techniques and tips and grading and processes for discussion boards. And let's focus on that on Thursday. Is there anything else that anybody needs right now that would be helpful to you as we say goodbye?
As always, these sessions are great, Steve. Thanks for doing them.
Thanks, Paul. I want to chat with you, Paul, before you go.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll say goodbye then. So everybody, I'll see you all on Thursday, and have a good couple days. Talk to you soon. Bye for now. And Carol.